The Help by Kathryn Stockett. Author Introduction. The Help is a historical fiction by American author Kathryn Stockett and published by Penguin Books in 2009. The story is about African American working in white household in Jackson, Mississippi during the early 1960s. A USA Today article called it is one of the summer sleeper hits. As a young girl living in Jackson, Mississippi's Kathryn Stockett loved spending time with her family's maid, Dimity, an African American woman who worked for her family since 1955. Dimity would play games with Stockett, tell her stories, and shower with her affection. But the young Stockett also witnessed the determination that Timothy faced working for a white family. Stockett's family forced Timothy to use a separate bathroom and to sit by herself while eating lunch. After graduating from the University of Alabama with a degree in English and creative writing, Stockett moved to New York City, where she turned these complicated experiences into her first novel, The Help. It was rejected by over 50 publishers. The book, once published, sold over 10 million copies and spent more than 100 weeks of the New York Times City's bestseller list. She currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Next, we move on to historical content of The Help, set in Jackson, Mississippi during the early days of 1960s civil rights movement. The Help portrays social life under the Jim Crow era law that enforced racial segregation. White and black people had separate hospitals, bathrooms, schools, and even graveyards. Civil rights protectors sought to dissolve the color line, a metaphor for segregation, by integrating the facilities and institutions that were kept separate. However, the majority of white Southerners opposed these changes, with some people even resorting to violence to maintain segregation. In the early 60s, if a black man used a white bathroom, he could expect white men to burn down his house, beat him, or even lynch him. Socket focuses on one particular low point in the civil rights movement: the violent murder of the black activist Megder ever by a pro segregation white man. But the novel ends with a hope for progress. Near the end of the book, Socket mentioned the passion of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin.
Hello everyone. My name is Sanjana from MA English Department and my register number is 28. Background of the novel The Help. The Help is a novel by American author Kathryn Stockett. The story is about an African American working in white households in Jackson, Mississippi during the early 1960s. It tells a group of women who get together to write a book about the experiences of Afro Americans working for white families. The Help by Kathryn Stockett was released in 2009 and became a bestseller. In 2011, the book also became a successful and popular movie. The Help brings up race issues in the southern US. The reason why Kathryn Stockett wrote The Help is described in her essay Too Little, Too Late. She explained that The Help's plot is related to her childhood, her view on racial relationships in her country, and her ethical intentions. Stockett explained that she felt ashamed of her bad attitude and view about her black nanny Dimitri, and she wanted to make it up now. She called her feeling as white mistake that she represented as a character of Skeeter, the main white character in The Help. Her view became complicated given the historical context of racial segregation and the Afro American civil rights movement. Before writing her novel, Stockett traced back the historical context of black servants through conducting interviews with both black housemates, and the children they raised in the 1860s. However, during her observation, she found the fear of black women to reveal their condition when they became the white ladies' servants, like the story of Skeeter in this novel. The resulting book caused a lot of commotion, not only in Jackson. Although the main characters do not participate in the actual civil rights movement, some of them tried to make changes in their own lives. Taken place in Jackson, Mississippi in the early 1960s as the background. The Help by Kathryn Stockett shows racial segregation and inequality toward the Afro American community. The Help is narrated by three women: Minnie, a black maid who was difficult to get a job because of her tempered personality; Evelyn, a black servant who worked in Miss Leafold's family to raise May Mobley; and Miss Keita, a white woman who wanted to be a writer. She had been raised by a black servant since she was young, and she was still wondering why her beloved maid, Constantine, was disappeared. Help is a black community that spend their lives raising white families. On the other hand, their own children were taken care of by others. The Help spent their days feeding, dressing, and playing with the children they raised. They watched the children grow and change like a white community in general, who unfortunately discriminate against the black maids, those who had raised them. The Help portrays racial segregation and inequalities among Afro Americans in Southern America. The chapters of the novel reveal the truth about what black servants consider their white employers. Evelyn described that their employers were unfair for their help. Black servants were often accused of stealing for some mistakes they made. The black servants were powerless to defend themselves. A white woman can fire for her help arbitrarily, initiating her white friend so that the black maid could not get any job, and once she destroyed the black maid's life. Evelyn also experienced such misery for the death of his son. The white men in the wood factory, a place where his son worked, did help him fast enough. This shows racial prejudice went both ways. The Help reveals Afro American life in the 1960s. On the other hand, The Help received criticism in other categories, such as the novel's language and its characters. Stockett explained that an editor previously wanted to change the dialogue in her novel, but she insisted to maintain it because she wanted Afro American characters to be different from white characters because that was what she remembered in her memory. However, in some essays and interviews, Stockett never explained why The Help contains a different and a unique dialect, different from the black community dialect in general. As a literary work, the novel is assumed to be a mirror of the real world, affirmed by Tew in his book Sastra than Ilmu Sastra. The framework Abrams crisis was evaluating literary works by imitating the world known as mimesis criticism. The characters and setting in the story may represent age, culture, and social in a particular place. In literary works, readers can find characters that experience many conflicts. The conflicts has a significant impact on the character's personality. The social conditions of the society can be the target of striking revocation in literary works. Literature as a way of communication, communicating thoughts, feelings, expressions, and a criticism of the writer against the social conditions at that time. Swinchwood and Lawrenson said, literature too preeminently concerned with man's social world, his adaptation to it and his desire to change it. Thus, the novel, as the major literary genre of industrial society, can be seen as a faithful attempt to recreate the social world of man's relation with his family and with family, politics, with the state. The help illustrates racial segregation and equality toward Afro Americans in South America. It is beneficial for analyzing this novel using the theory of racism and racial segregation in America. Initially, Afro American segregation and oppression create poverty and continued social and economic dislocation in South America. It mostly became a political phenomenon, not only as a phenomenon of individual or group inadequacies. Although the marginalization of Afro Americans is embedded in historical issues, it goes on to say that this study is interesting in being investigated and also has an important consequence of political and social structures. Plotline. The novel starts in 1962, Jackson, Mississippi. Evelyn Clark, a black maid, is taking care of the only child of Elizabeth Leafold, a white housewife. Hilly Holbrook and Eugenia Skeeter Phelan are discussing whether to pass a bill that would require every white household to have a separate bathroom for black maids. Skeeter finds Evelyn and asks if she wishes things could be different. She doesn't want to tell Skeeter how she really feels, so she says everything's fine. A few days later, Minnie Jackson loses her job. She's also been fired by Hilly Holbrook because of rumors that she was a thief. After losing her job, she tells Evelyn about the revenge she took on Hilly Holbrook and won't tell her any more details other than it involved a pie. In the end, Minnie finds work with Celia Foot, who treats everyone equally regardless of race or class. Meanwhile, Skeeter gets a job writing an advice column about housekeeping for the Jackson Journal. She learns that Evelyn's son had been working on his own book but died before he could finish it. Skeeter asks her friend Elizabeth Leafold to interview Evelyn about her experiences with white families and decides to write a story based on those interviews. At first, Evelyn is hesitant to tell her stories because she is afraid of losing her job or being targeted by racists. She agrees to talk with Skeeter for the sake of stopping racism in Jackson. Minnie also tells Skeeter her story, but no one else will out of fear. Haley finds a book on Jim Crow laws in Skeeter's bag and thinks that she may be integrationalist. integrationist. Therefore, Hilly distances herself from her and tells other women not to associate with her anymore. Hilly's maid Yule May steals a ring from Hilly to pay for her twins' college education. She had previously asked Hilly for money but was refused. The maids are angry at the injustice and decide to contribute their stories in Skeeter's book. When the book is nearly finished, Skeeter starts to worry that her maid's pseudonyms won't be enough to keep Hilly from figuring out that she wrote a book about Jackson. Minnie tells Evelyn and Skeeter how she got back at Hilly for ruining her chances of finding work. She baked a pie with her own feces in it and fed it to Hilly. When Hilly reads about this story in the book, she'll know for sure that the book is about Jackson, but will also use her influence to stir people away from coming to the same conclusion so that they won't find out what happened between them. After the book gets published, people in Jackson start to realize it's about them. Minnie's plan works and Healy tries to convince them otherwise. Skeeter ends up accepting a job as an editorial assistant in New York and after a tearful goodbye with Evelyn picks up and goes. Even so, Evelyn still has her column in the local paper where she tells more stories of the maid's life. She feels unburdened now that she is able to tell their stories at last. Thank you.
The characters of the novel The Help. First, Evelyn Clark. One of the novel's three narrators, Evelyn is a wise but reserved middle aged black maid who takes pride in knowing that she has helped raise 17 white children in her lifetime. Second one, Minnie Jackson, another narrator and protagonist of this novel. Minnie Jackson is a wise, cracking mother of five who refuses to curb her outspoken personality even though it gets her into trouble with her white employers. The next one, Eugenia Skeeter, the third narrator and also protagonist of this novel. Skeeter is a young white college graduate who comes from a wealthy southern family. The fourth one, Celia Foote, the kind but clueless employer of Minnie Jackson. Celia comes from a poor white trash. The final, Hilly Holbrook, the novel's antagonist. Hilly is on the surface the idol of the southern housewife, loyal to her husband, adored by her friends and neighbors, and loving to her two children. Thank you.
Themes of the novel Help. In the novel Help, we can see the major theme as race and racism. Race manifests in the lives of a black maid in the number of ways. They are this black maid are denied opportunity for educational as well as for the professional advancement, and they perform only repetitive work for the white family. They are not allowed to express their feeling. They are only used to serve the white people. And the other thing we can see is mothers and daughter relationship. And this mothers and daughter relationship has different connotation. This novel help examine several different types of mothers and daughter. Elizabeth Leafold has a strained relationship with her mother, who is alone and demanding, and she continues this unhealthy dynamic by being neglectful and critical of her own daughter May Mobley. But when we see Evelyn, she acts as a mother figure for May Mobley, and we from this we can see not only the blood relation which prevails, but also the caring of Evelyn makes a mother-daughter relationship very well. Love and friendship. And Help takes a close look at many type of love and friendship, and some of them are unlikely and fraught with difficulties. The close bond between the black caretakers and the white children, May Mobley, as well as Skeeter and Constantine, her servant, show that the nurturing love is not limited to blood relationship. As we see later in the book, this bond is often unfairly complicated by the strictures of racist society. And being a woman, and this was also the major theme, there was a varying difficulty faced by women constitute the another major theme. In the workplace, Minnie struggles with the possibility of being fired due to her outspoken personality. At home, she is violently abused by her husband. Evelyn must cope up with the sorrow of her son untimely death at the same time that she tries to support the neglected May Mobley. Skeeter is also struggling with the world that does not value her professional ambition and tries to force her into the narrow roles of wife and mother, but Skeeter eventually succeeds like the black maids. And Southern values. This novel is like a window which help us to see the mid-century South and giving the reader the vivid impression of the beautiful landscape and warm culture of the South. And this include the positive qualities such as friendliness, generosity, and we see this close social ties in the way that family members treat one another. It also include racism, segregation, misogyny, which are evident in the violent enforcement of separation between race and the lack of professional option for white women. Thank you.
Symbols of the novel The Help. Skin color. The obvious point of the book is the dividing line of skin color, black and white. However, this is not as straightforward as the Hillies of the world would make it would be. Scott mixes the colors on either side of the color margin and shows how good and bad personality traits are commingled. Bloodlines are also combined. Both Constantine and Abilene had white fathers. Constantine's baby is so light that she is considered white. The depth of color, we are told, helps one person get a job and it puts great constraints on someone else. There can be no generalizations made by color alone. Abilene coaches May Bobley on how to view people of color. She makes up stories that show the irrelevance of skin color as a human condition. She invents a green Martin Luther King and two little girls who each have hair, a nose and 10 toes. So we are the same, just a different color. Say that little colored kid. The little white girl, she agreed and they were friends. The end. Next, red. The color red is commonly used as a symbol for passion, fury, and death. Red is the color of blood which courses through the body. Red is visible to everywhere in the book. Usually, red is against a backdrop of black and white to empathize and foreshadow a major theme. In The Help, the black and white scenes threaten to erupt in red blood. The satchel in which Skeeter carries the manuscript is red. May Mobley's favorite cake is strawberry red, although Elizabeth orders her a chocolate one for her birthday. The dress that Hilly wears and Celia tears is auburn red. In Abeline's front hall, there is a bag of old clothes that Evelyn doesn't know what to do with. In the past, she either wore some of the dresses passed along by white employers or she gave them to friends. This bag given to her by Hilly is different. Every item is embroidered in red thread with the initials HMV, Hilly Walter Holbrook. With this, Hilly would brand her slaves. Book. Help is the name of the book that Skeeter writes with information from Evelyn, Minnie, and the other maids. It symbolizes Skeeter's transition into a writer and her growing awareness of the civil rights movement. It also symbolizes the maids' growing awareness of their own value as human beings and their ability to do something to improve their lives. Signed copies of Skeeter's book became precious gifts given by a grateful community to both Abilene and Skeeter for giving rise to the suppressed voices of the help. The book stands for the considerable phase, past and present of black literacy. As such, it refutes the myths and impressions of the community's talent and capabilities. Next symbol, bathroom. As human renovations go, a new bathroom is something that many house owners would gladly pay for. After all, Hilly points out that money will be recovered when the house is sold. However, the new toilet Hilly is advocating is not a luxury room but an extra place for the help to use so that the family is spared sharing this intimate space. Hilly's proposal is symbolic of the way blacks are treated as second-class citizens. The separate toilet represents a dividing line between the maids and their employers, a line that, according to Hilly, should not be crossed. Hilly is talking out of ignorance and prejudice. She is perpetuating segregation along visible racial lines. The only part that is invisible is the real person who is the maid. She is required to clean and tend to the house, feed the family, and nurture the children, but she is not recognized or acknowledged as the necessary or vital part of the scene. If this were a photograph, the help would have been airbrushed out. Mimosa tree. Celia's mimosa tree symbolizes the importance of appearance, particularly of social expectations for women. From the time she moves into her house, Celia hates the ugly mimosa tree out front. She spends most of the time overlooking the tree, longing to chop it down. Back home in Sugar Ditch, Celia was good with flowers and she longs to redo the landscape in her yard, but never follows through because she's ashamed of her background. She keeps the tree so that the land fits in with the neighborhood. Celia also claims to hate the tree because its wispy flowers remind her of baby's hair. But Celia can't have children, so the reference to baby hair is significant. As long as the tree stands, Celia feels a connection with her failed fertility. When Celia finally musters the courage to chop down the tree after the disastrous Junior League benefit, she takes control of her own image. She knows the women of Jackson will never accept her, so she no longer needs to keep up appearances. Miss Celia can do what she wishes with the yard because she has only herself to please. Cutting down the mimosa tree is also symbolic of Celia coming to terms with her infertility by removing the remainder of baby hair from her front lawn. Settings of the novel Help is a step back in time, written in the 2000s. It focuses on a quite recent period in the history of the United States, but one which has not yet been abundantly discussed in literature. Indeed, the plot is set in Mississippi in 1962. Despite the introduction of racial segregation in the 1940s, the society of the southern United States was fluid. By giving a voice to three women from different social positions in that society, Scott Stockett has turned the Help into a historical novel. The customs and habits of the society and the time period are described and mentioned in a realistic way. For example, let's consider the upbringing of children and the condition of women. With the situation of May Mobley, the disinterest of women for their own children is evoked. Although she must show some interest to satisfy social expectations. In the same way, Skeeter's mother insists on the importance of complying with social expectations and appearing as a timid and discreet young woman in order to attract a husband and create a respectable family. It reveals the pressure on women of the bauxite. The Southern American culture is also evoked through the description of the eating habits and the meals prepared by the maids, which Minnie tries to teach to Celia Forte. Uh, More serious aspects of society are also taken into account. The desire to separate the social space in its smallest details, right up to the toilets, is illustrated by Hilly's insistence on a separate toilets for white and black people. The book Skater finds as she is doing research is a collection of Jim Crow's laws for the South, a list of laws defining what black people could or could not do in a series of states in the South of the United States. It enumerated the different modalities of separation of the citizens according to their skin color. Thus, from political and social perspective, the novel paints a society that is both distinct and close and which resulted in the current United States. By choosing the year 1962, Kathryn Stockett remains as of the importance of a page in the contemporary American history. 1 year later, on 28 August 1963, Martin Luther King, American pastor 1929 to 1968, made his famous I Have a Dream speech during a march to Washington for freedom and employment. Then in July 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed. It made any attempt at discrimination based on gender, skin color, or special origin illegal. The three narrators, black and white, are thus placed on the verge of these crucial changes for American society. They appear as their catalyst on the smaller scales of Jackson, and their humble destinies join that of illustrious models such as Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, who deeply modified the society of the United States.
Now, let's move on to the critical analysis of the novel. In this fiction, Racial discrimination, violence, and inequality are the most prominent factors creating troubles for black people in North America and South Africa for long. These factors shows the authority of the whites over black races. The very big problem is the sordidness and wretchedness of blacks' life regarding their shelter, while includes home structure and its location. At last, many critics and writers have been writing about racism. The purpose of this research is to analyze racism revealed through the physical aspects of the concept of home that is mentioned in the book The Help by the novelist Kathryn Stockett. Thank you.